Welcome back yet again. Today we're going to have an upgrade video. The upgrade will be the G4 Cube. I propose to upgrade the RAM from 512 megabytes to 1.5 gigabytes, the maximum it can support. I propose to put in an SSD, at least I'm going to try. Should be doable. Now, there are a couple of other things. You may notice over there, it's not asleep, it's off. And I didn't turn it off. When I had first set it up and first reinstalled the operating systems, as I explained, it was going to sleep and it wouldn't wake up from sleep. And about the only way I could get it back again was to pull the power cord and plug it back in and then turn it on again. So I disabled sleep completely in system preferences. And it doesn't sleep now. It just shuts itself off. If it's been sitting for a while, I can turn it on and, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes, half an hour or so. I haven't really timed it. Then it'll shut itself off. I'll turn it back on and get maybe 8-9 minutes. Shuts itself off, etc. Obviously, you can't function with the computer that way. In reading up on it, I have read a couple of possibilities. There's a rubber gasket on the inside of the enclosure, right where the power button would go. Now, that could be replaced, but getting one these days is going to be a kind of a trying thing. However, I did read a suggestion of just taking the gasket out, turning it over, and putting it back in. That, of course, would be the simplest thing to do, so I'm going to try that. I also read suggestions about putting electrical tape around there to add a little bit more sealing, because that's what's happening. It's the power button on the cube itself that is activating itself. So if you can make it a little bit less sensitive, there is the option of just taping over the entire button, at which point you have no button. And I could still turn it on using the power button on the cinema display. Or I would imagine if I put an older Mac USB keyboard, the ones that came with the iMac G3s, they have start buttons on them, and I would imagine that I could start the computer using that. Awkward. So hopefully the fixes will work and it'll still be possible to use the button on the cube itself. Now, the other thing that is distressing, there are two FireWire 400 ports on the bottom. They don't seem to work. I plugged drives into them and the drives don't mount, and there's no indication that there's anything plugged in. That could be a more awkward kind of fix, because without those FireWire ports, the only connectivity you've got is USB 1, which is pretty poor. Or, over the network, there is that too, which is also very slow. So, I have tried resetting the PRAM. I've tried resetting the NVRAM in open firmware. One suggestion that I heard, and I can't make things any worse, I don't think, is to reset the PMU, the power management unit, which means there's a button on the inside. There are on all PowerMac G4s, G3s too. Actually, there's one on G5. It's just that getting at that button on the cube is a substantially more awkward thing. But we'll give it a go and see if maybe doing that. I don't hold a lot of hope for that, but it's worth doing while I've got the cube opened. So anyhow, stay tuned. We'll see how I can go about recording all of this for posterity, hopefully to a positive end. All right, let's get right at it. Well, with upgrading the cube, the easy part, the RAM, 2 DIMMs, no worries. Very simple to get to, very simple to do. Putting in an SSD, it didn't seem sensible to me to be even considering getting another IDE hard drive, since no one makes them anymore, and it would best be putting in someone else's old problem. So we're going to put an SSD. It does have a SATA connector on it, and it's in a sled. It's probably going to be loose in there, and maybe that's just as well. It needs to have this IDE to SATA adapter in it and the Molex power plug in order to give power to the drive. That is a more involved thing. The bottle caps here are, of course, to keep screws sorted out. And we have the toolkit, very handy toolkit from OWC. All right, now the more problematic things, the problem that the cube has displayed in starting and stopping unexpectedly. From research, that's definitely a very common problem with cubes, and I've run into a couple of possible solutions. The other one, the FireWire, I don't know that I'm going to be able to do anything or not, but we'll take a look. Okay, so first step, removing the cube from the enclosure. Now, just to give you an overview of what needs to be done, one suggestion for solving the issue of the FireWire is to press the CUDA button, which is a button on the logic board. That button will reset the PMU, the power management unit, which can fix a lot of issues. Here's the difficulty. This is the graphics card. So I'm going to need to get the graphics card out of there in order to get to the logic board, which is underneath it. Without removing the graphics card, there is no way to even press the CUDA button. So I'll do that, and prior to do that, we'll take out the one RAM DIMM that's in there, and that will come out. Okay. Now, the other possibility, you can reset the PMU, evidently, by just removing the PRAM battery. I am not planning on doing that. This, by the way, is the hard drive. All right, now, hard drive connectors. We need to one of the first things, I think I showed you this when I first opened it up. Can I get the airport door open with one hand? Maybe not. Okay, don't look. I just had to put it down. Okay, the IDE connector to the hard drive that's in there is right here, and this tab, theoretically, I should be able to just pull up. The Molex power connector is down here. Those can be a pain to get out, but it will come out. Then we can reclose it. I guess I'm going to leave the airport card in there. I'm not sure why, since here in the 21st century, it no longer works. Now, another thing. To get the hard drive out, we're going to have to remove this, which wouldn't be a big problem except you've got the start button, which is connected to the logic board over the cable there. It's kind of fragile. You have to be very, very careful to take that out in a way that does not damage it. Then this part of the heatsink unscrews and comes off. It doesn't really need to go back in since you've got an SSD replacing it, and in fact, it's screwed into the hard drive. So with that SSD in there, there'd be no place to screw it in anyway. All right, now, one other thing you need to look at. In terms of the problem starting and stopping, on the enclosure, this here is the bottom side of where the power button is, such as the power button is. There is a rubber gasket in there. Now, the way to fix the problem really would be to replace the gasket. You just can't get replacement gaskets anymore. So there's a couple of possibilities. One would be to buy a big set of rubber gaskets in hopes that there would be one in there that would actually fit. The other is to put electrical tape. In fact, one suggestion basically was to just cover up the button with electrical tape. Of course, then the button becomes non-functional, but you should still be able to turn on the computer with the button on the Apple Cinema display. Or if you used an older computer, you could simply use the power button that is on that keyboard, an older keyboard, I should say, one of the original iMac G3 keyboards. They all have power buttons on them. They plug in via USB, and you should be able to turn the computer on using that. Now, one suggestion I read, though, was to take out the gasket, turn it over, and put it in upside down. That's the easiest solution if it works, so I've tried that. If that doesn't work, I suppose we'll try the electrical tape. Okay, so where we're going to start, I think the best place to start, over here with the computer itself, would be taking out that graphics card, pressing the CUDA button, and then putting the graphics card back in, so we don't have to worry about any possible damage going on in there. Okay, so I'm going to stop the recording here, and we'll start it again when something has happened. A very quick update here. Obviously, I've taken that one DIMM that was in there out, but in terms of removing the graphics card, there's a screw here, what I was pointing at. That comes out. There's a metal clip. Now, the thing is, according to the pictures in the service manual, the top of that metal clip, it's right here, should be on top of the graphics card, not tucked in underneath. Okay, now, the other thing that needs to be done would be here on the I/O. We are supposed to have two screws. One here and one here, which is missing. And if you look carefully in there, you're going to see that the reason that screw is not in there was that it's not lined up. This clearly is not the original graphics card. Somebody upgraded the graphics card, which is probably just as well, because had it not been upgraded, it wouldn't drive the cinema display. All right, so hang in there, stay tuned, and I'm going to get to work here. Got the graphics card off now. I have not disconnected it. I don't need to do that. Logic board is in here. That's the CUDA button. Okay, now you're supposed to wait 10 seconds before powering on the computer again. Ha ha ha. It's going to be a lot more than that. All right, so far this proved not to be too difficult. Hopefully I haven't damaged any of the connections. So I'm going to be reconnecting the graphics card now. All right, now we're on to getting the SSD in there. In order to do that, we have to disconnect these 4 screws from this top plate. And then there are 2 screws on the sides here. This one is longer than this one, and 2 more similar screws. This will enable us to unscrew the heatsink that's holding the hard drive in place, which would be this one here. This shouldn't be a real difficult thing. Famous last words. Okay, we'll see how well that goes. This just comes up. Now you can see where that cord is for the power button. I'm going to put this back down so I can disconnect that without damage. Okay, the first glitch of the process. The Apple repair manual did not indicate that you need to remove this top shield or unplug the power button in order to do this process. So I have left it on, at least for now, although it is still unscrewed. The screw on the right, they're Torx T10s. The one on the right loosened fairly easily. The one on the left was absolutely frozen into place. I have applied some liquid wrench. Hopefully in a few minutes that will be able to loosen. And there's another missing screw. So yeah, someone has been inside this machine before. I guess that's not that surprising given the age of it. But we will see. If I can't get that heat shield out, I'm not going to be able to get the hard drive out. Oh well, stay tuned. God bless whoever invented liquid wrench. So we have here a Western Digital hard drive, IDE connection, and an empty space. Liquid wrench to the rescue once again. Well, this was a truly fun experience. The big problem is there's very little play in that IDE cable. And on the adapter, if the adapter were such that the IDE was turned the other way around, it would have gone together pretty easily. But trying to get both the IDE cable in, which it is, and the SSD plugged into the adapter, which it now is, was absolute murder. And we have managed to get the Molex connector in there as well. My biggest concern, I don't know how well you can see it. Let's get some light on it, maybe. Yeah, you see the jumper there? It's in the master position. However, the optical drive and the hard drive are both on the same IDE cable. I really don't know which one is supposed to be the master. But I guess I'm just going to put this thing back together and see if it finds a drive. All right, we'll go handheld here. Uh, I've got everything connected. Uh, the best of all possible outcomes would be that the machine chimes. Well, first of all, the power's on at all. Then it chimes. That it boots up. Now, if there's some miracle, resetting the power management unit has got the FireWire going. I have plugged in my portable hard drive with bootable OS partitions on it. So in a perfect world, the machine would actually boot up into an operating system. I'm not expecting that. I'm expecting the flashing question mark. But, okay, so the start button works. There's the chime. Sound's turned down kind of far. Yep, flashing question mark. Now, the thing is, we can't tell from this if the SSD is being detected or not. What I'm going to have to do is to put an install CD into the machine. Try to boot up from that, and then see if within that we can detect a disk. All right, I'll be back. Well, we appear to be booting into the OS 9 installation CD now. Yes, indeed we are. And I left my tripod downstairs at the workbench, so we're kind of stuck with this. And we see the CD wallpaper, which is what we would expect. And of course, being the CD, takes a long time. Yeah, the ejection mechanism on this slot loading optical drive is very weak. It just barely pokes the disk up. I have to grab it with my needle-nose pliers. Doesn't seem to have damaged the disk any so far. All right. Okay. So we're booting up into the installer. That's something. Okay, let's look in utilities. Go to drive setup. There we go. It is detecting the ATA drive. Just saying it's not mounted. So if we select it and initialize it, there isn't any data on it. Oh my lord, this is actually going to work. Well, we still don't know about the random shutdown. Hopefully that's fixed. Certainly the start button, the power button worked. But we shall see. Initialization was successful. And there's the drive. All right. So we might as well just go ahead and install macOS 9. Now, you've seen me do plenty of installations of operating systems lately, so I'm going to pause the video and just let this thing run. But the drive is in there and detected. CD drive still works. Those are both very good things. The power button works. We'll see if it stays up and running. The FireWire, that was not successful. We haven't really seen the RAM yet, but that shouldn't be a problem. So stay tuned. I wish I'd timed this, but it couldn't have been more than somewhere between 6 and 8 minutes. Now, this last minute could take a while. This has been one of the fastest OS installations I've seen. And I've been seeing a lot of them lately. Between the Catalina 10.15.4 and all of these older macOS installations I've been doing. Okay, so we're going to quit. Yeah, I got to try a different mouse. Special. Restart. Okay. I didn't hear the optical drive spin up. Maybe it is, but I'm pretty sure we're booting off the SSD now. Come on. Yeah, look at all those extensions loading. I don't know why it does this. Sometimes it installs the default wallpaper, sometimes it installs this. But what does it really matter? macOS 9 is up and running on the Cube. Now, I'll do a little tiny bit of customization of this. I'll get my default wallpaper back. Then I'll need to install OS 10.4 Tiger so that I can get in the internet, that I can connect my network server, and be able to set up both of these OSs. Okay, but before I go about installing Tiger, I have dinner to eat, so stay tuned. So we have booted successfully into the Tiger installer. So now I have to go through and install Tiger, which of course is installing right on top of OS 9. The two are intended to cohabit the same partition, so there's no need for me to partition the drive. And honestly, 120 gigabytes should be plenty for what's going to happen with this computer. So yeah, I'll get this installed. I take pity on you. I will not make you sit through yet another OS 10 installation. You've seen enough of that already if you've actually been looking at these. But I will get it up and running, and we'll let you see what happens when we get back to, hopefully, the Tiger desktop. See you soon. Start running software update, which jumped right up. I did want to verify, yes, in fact, 1.5 gigabytes of RAM. So, the upgrades all worked. the one exception, and it has been running, it hasn't shut itself off. The one exception would seem to be the getting the FireWire to work. And I really didn't think that a PMU reset was going to do that. I don't know what, if anything, I'm going to do. It's not as simple as putting in a PCI card. There are no PCI slots. Well, anyway, I will get this set up, and we'll get back into this and sum up this computer a bit. Stay tuned. Well, it is the next day. I left it on all night to see if it would stay running, and it did. So evidently turning that gasket over and putting it in upside down solved the problem of the random shutdowns. So I've got Tiger completely configured, all of the apps that I want. Got the PPC App Store, 10.4 Fox, 10.4 Bird, iLife 06, NeoOffice, that's Office Mac 2004, and iWork 09, which for some reason works on the Cube but doesn't work on the Sawtooth. That doesn't really make sense to me. Okay, let's take a second here and boot it up into OS 9. All right. Speaker's not super loud because I've got them connected with an extender since I've left the Cube on the floor just so that I could access it more easily if I needed to. And yes, we are booting into OS 9. Interesting how on the camera you see flashing on the power button on the display. You don't see that in real life. Okay, there the extension's loading up. Just waiting for the desktop to get populated. And there we go. Now, just if you're curious, and there's the control strip. If you're curious, this is much more what OS 9 is supposed to look like, because this machine only has the one solid-state drive. There's no... The only way you could put another one in, I suppose you could take the optical drive out and add that in. So yeah, ClassZilla for browsing mail addresses, AppleWorks, the entire Office Mac 2001 suite, Print Shop, iTunes, iMovie, and most of the things that I've got on the G4 version. I left this set up in a more traditional way since I don't have all of those partition icons. So I'm going to be working with this machine some, and we'll get a report back on it very shortly, I should think. I would say the upgrades went extremely well. The only issue that did not get solved, and I didn't think it was going to, is the FireWire ports not working. I read something online with the suggestion of pressing the CUDA button to reset the PMU. I couldn't imagine that was going to work, and it obviously didn't. That's awkward. So the only input that you've got is USB 1.1. Either that or over the network. So I hope you've enjoyed this look here at the upgrade process on the G4 Cube. It really wasn't that hard to do. If you've worked on a Mac Mini, which I've done rather a lot, uh, you'd find that this is actually a pretty easy thing to work on. The only problem was that adapter on the SSD. If I had wanted to spend the extra money for an IDE SSD, it would have been a very smooth process. Well, at any rate, please be good to other people. Be good to yourselves. Try not to be too lonely. And take very good and careful care of yourselves in these difficult times.